Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something pretty incredible.
Absolutely.
We're talking psychedelics and, their potential for helping veterans who are dealing with PTSD.
Yeah.
It's really gaining traction, this topic.
For good reason.
Yeah, and for good reason. I mean, the stats are pretty staggering.
Tragic.
We've lost over 30,000 veterans to suicide since 9/11.
It's a lot.
It is. And, traditional therapies just haven't always been able to step up to the plate and provide that relief.
Right. They haven't been enough.
Yeah, so for this deep dive, we're really going to be exploring that world of psychedelic therapy for veterans, and we've got a great resource from Psychedelics. Today, it's an article called Psychedelic Literacy for Veterans, and it's just jam-packed with personal stories and insights from experts like Dr. Robert Kaufman. He's a retired Navy captain and psychiatrist who has actually shifted his entire focus to psychedelic-assisted treatments.
Yeah, it's interesting why he made that shift.
It is interesting.
He actually talks about how the standard approaches, they just weren't working for this kind of trauma the veterans experience.
Yeah.
Traditional therapies can sometimes feel like just putting a Band-Aid on like a really deep wound.
And psychedelics might be able to offer something a little bit different, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Especially the ones that promote neuroplasticity.
Right.
I mean, even Dr. Kaufman uses the phrase mending soul wounds.
It's powerful.
It is very powerful imagery.
Yeah.
So could you maybe break down neuroplasticity a little bit for us and explain how psychedelics might be working on that deeper level?
Yeah, so neuroplasticity is really just the brain's ability to change and adapt over time.
Okay.
It's how we learn new things and form connections. And what's interesting is that certain psychedelics seem to create this like window of heightened neuroplasticity where the brain can rewire itself
Okay.
in a way that's like super beneficial for processing trauma.
So it's not just masking symptoms, it's getting to the root of the problem.
Exactly.
And it's about like rewiring those deep ingrained patterns.
Creating lasting change.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And the article highlights Heroic Hearts Project.
Yeah.
They're doing some great work.
They are doing amazing work.
Supporting veterans,
Which are retreats.
fostering community, and they're really working to build something called psychedelic literacy.
I love that term.
Yeah.
Psychedelic literacy, so important.
It is key for approaching these therapies responsibly.
Well, and one person who I think really embodies that idea of psychedelic literacy is Jesse Gould,
Oh, yeah.
the founder of Heroic Hearts.
His story is amazing.
It's Colonel
Former Army Ranger,
who left
his investment banking career.
after an ayahuasca experience in Peru helped him deal with his own PTSD.
Wow, what a change.
Talk about a life change trip.
Experience, right.
Experience.
And it just speaks to how powerful these experiences can be,
Yeah.
but also highlights how important it is to do it responsibly.
And you know what I really appreciate about Heroic Hearts is they're not just like throwing veterans into this.
Right.
They're providing like comprehensive support before, during, and after the experience.
That integration piece is so crucial.
It is.
It's not just about having the experience, it's about processing it, understanding it, and actually applying it to your life.
That's where the community aspect really helps.
Yeah.
Having people who understand what you've been through.
Yeah, it makes such a difference.
Absolutely.
So we've got this organization, Heroic Hearts, creating community, promoting psychedelic literacy. And then there's this book, The Veteran's Guide to Psychedelics,
Oh, yeah.
co-authored by Matt Zaman and Heroic Hearts.
That's a fantastic resource for veterans.
It seems like an amazing resource.
We're curious about this.
Clinically reviewed, it focuses on safe, responsible, therapeutic psychedelic use.
It's not just information.
It really is a guide.
It helps them understand the risks, the benefits, how to prepare, how to integrate.
It almost feels like we're watching a paradigm shift in mental health care,
Especially for veterans
especially for veterans.
Yeah.
Like, we're seeing the limitations
of these traditional approaches.
and recognizing that potential of these alternative approaches.
yeah, it's just
Like, to get to that root of the problem.
from managing symptoms
Yeah.
to exploring the root causes.
And really creating that lasting healing.
The veteran community is really paving the way
They are.
for this new paradigm.
It's inspiring.
Yeah.
So we've got those limitations. We've got the potential of psychedelics and neuroplasticity, the importance of literacy and integration, and the work of Heroic Hearts.
Right.
But the article also highlights the power of these personal stories.
Oh, yeah.
And there's some really impactful accounts from veterans who have actually found relief through these therapies.
They offer a glimpse into like the transformative potential
Yeah.
of psychedelic therapy?
For example, Tom Satterley, a
Mhm.
Delta Force veteran,
Yeah.
talks about how psychedelics allowed him to confront that trauma
In ways that traditional therapies just couldn't.
in ways that nothing else could touch.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's amazing.
Breakthrough pain that no other method could touch.
It really speaks to the potential of these therapies
Yeah,
to reach people.
on a whole other level.
Yeah, in a way that traditional methods haven't been able to.
Yeah, and there's another story from Steve Kiefer, who served with the 2nd Ranger Battalion, and his story is also really compelling. He talks about how psychedelics, supported by community,
Right.
helped him shift his perspective from one of constant battles to one of fulfillment and peace.
That's a key point.
Yeah.
It's not just about the psychedelic experience.
Right.
It's about the integration and that support system.
That helps you make sense of it
Exactly.
and apply it
Yeah.
to your life,
So it's about creating a space for healing and transformation.
internally and externally.
Right.
So we're seeing this convergence of scientific research, these personal testimonies, and the work of organizations like Heroic Hearts,
All pointing toward the potential
all pointing towards
of
it.
psychedelic therapy for veterans.
It's a lot to take in,
It is.
but it's a really important conversation to have.
It is. And it's also important to remember
Yeah.
that while those personal stories are powerful,
Yeah.
it's crucial to approach these therapies responsibly with caution.
And speaking of responsible use,
Okay?
the article emphasizes the importance of understanding the potential risks involved,
Right.
as well as having a really solid foundation.
In preparation, setting, and integration.
This isn't something to be taken lightly.
Yeah.
And that's where organizations like Heroic Hearts are so important. They're providing guidance, they're providing support.
That's where psychedelic literacy becomes so important.
Yeah,
It's not just about understanding the potential benefits.
right.
It's about being aware of the potential risks.
Yeah.
And how to mitigate them.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about those risks. What are some of the things that veterans or anyone considering psychedelic therapy should be aware of?
Well, it's important to remember that psychedelics can have, powerful psychological effects.
Yeah.
They can bring up unresolved trauma, they can intensify emotions,
Yeah.
and they can even trigger temporary psychosis
Oh, wow.
in some cases.
Okay.
So that's why it's crucial to have proper preparation,
Right.
a safe and supportive setting, and experienced facilitators
Yeah.
who can guide individuals through the experience.
This is not something to approach casually.
Exactly, and that's why organizations like Heroic Hearts emphasize the importance of a therapeutic context.
Yeah.
These aren't recreational drugs.
Right.
These are powerful tools that need to be used responsibly
With intention.
and with intention.
That makes a lot of sense. So we're seeing a lot of promise, but
Yeah.
caution is key.
Yeah.
Careful consideration is key. And one of the things the article highlights is avoiding self-treatment.
Right.
While those personal stories are really inspiring,
Yeah.
these individuals were working with experienced facilitators in controlled settings.
Yeah.
Attempting to replicate that on your own without guidance can be really risky
Incredibly risky.
and potentially harmful.
Yeah.
So again, professional guidance, supportive community,
Informed.
informed about the benefits and the risks.
And that brings us back to psychedelic literacy.
It does.
It's about empowering individuals to make informed decisions
Yes.
about their own healing journey.
About their own healing journey. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're talking about responsible use, and I'm kind of curious about what are some of the key elements of safe practice when it comes to psychedelic therapy?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Like, what should people, especially veterans, be looking for?
Well, there's this concept known as set and setting that's super important in psychedelic therapy. Set refers to the person's mindset going into the experience. So like their intentions, expectations, emotional state, and then setting refers to the actual physical and social environment where the experience takes place.
So it's not just about the substance itself.
Right.
It's really about creating that safe space for the whole experience.
Exactly. And that includes having, trained facilitators there who can guide the person through the experience, provide emotional support, and really help them integrate those insights or challenges that might come up.
So it's like the facilitator is almost like a guide on a journey.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, helping the person kind of navigate the terrain and make sense of what they're experiencing.
Yeah. And just like a good guide, a skilled facilitator can help anticipate potential challenges,
Yeah.
provide reassurance,
Yeah.
and offer tools for navigating those like difficult emotions or experiences that might come up.
Right. And speaking of challenges, you mentioned earlier that psychedelics can sometimes intensify emotions.
Yeah.
Or even bring up unresolved trauma. So how are those situations handled in a therapeutic setting?
Well, that's where the preparation and integration pieces are so important.
Yeah.
During preparation, individuals work with therapists to explore their intentions, identify potential triggers, and really develop coping mechanisms for managing those, difficult emotions. And then during integration,
Hmm.
they process the experience, make sense of any insights or challenges, and then they work to apply those learnings to their everyday lives.
So it's not just about having the psychedelic experience, it's
Yeah.
about the work that happens before and after.
The psychedelic experience can be like this catalyst
Yeah.
for healing and transformation, but it's really the therapeutic work that surrounds that experience
Hmm.
that helps people make those changes last.
It emphasizes that therapeutic aspect of
Yeah.
psychedelic therapy. It's not just about taking a substance.
Right.
It's about really engaging in a process of self-exploration
And healing.
and healing.
And that's what sets it apart from recreational drug use.
Oh.
It's about intention, guidance, and integration.
It's interesting because the article also touches upon how psychedelic therapy could potentially address not just PTSD,
Mm.
but other issues that veterans often face,
Yeah.
like depression, anxiety, even chronic pain. It seems like these therapies could be a real game changer for veterans' mental and physical health.
That's what's so exciting about this field. We're seeing, promising research
Yeah.
in a variety of areas, and it's really becoming clear that psychedelics have the potential to completely change how we approach mental health care.
It's like we're on the cusp of a whole new understanding of the mind and its potential to heal.
Right.
But even with all this promise, there are still challenges, right? I mean, psychedelic therapy, it isn't exactly mainstream yet.
Yeah. One of the biggest challenges is accessibility.
Hmm.
It's still largely unregulated, and it can be pretty expensive,
Yeah, that makes sense.
which means it's not available to everyone who could benefit.
That's a huge point.
Yeah,
It shouldn't just be a treatment for the privileged few.
exactly. And this really ties into the larger movement for psychedelic acceptance and research. The more we can destigmatize these substances
Right.
and fund, legitimate research, the more accessible these therapies can become for everybody, including veterans.
It's about shifting the paradigm from
Yeah.
fear and prohibition
To understand it,
to understand it.
education and responsible use.
And that's where organizations like Heroic Hearts are really stepping up.
AR,
They're not just providing services, they're advocating for change.
pushing the conversation forward
Pushing that conversation forward, they're bridging the gap.
between the scientific community, policymakers, and the veterans themselves.
Besides Heroic Hearts, are there other initiatives or organizations working to make psychedelic therapy more accessible?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There are a number of other organizations doing really great work in this space.
Okay.
The Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, MAPS.
Okay.
They've been a leader in psychedelic research for decades.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of MAPS.
Yeah. And they're actually conducting clinical trials right now
Oh, wow.
on MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD.
I've heard about that. It's showing some really promising results.
The results have been super encouraging.
That's great.
And MAPS is also working to train therapists in psychedelic-assisted therapies and to advocate for those policy changes that would make these treatments more accessible. And then there's the VA,
Okay.
the Veterans Affairs Office of Research and Development.
Okay.
While they haven't endorsed psychedelic therapy yet, they're funding research on the potential benefits of these treatments for veterans.
It sounds like there's at least a growing recognition within the VA that we need to explore all options
Absolutely.
when it comes to treating veterans' mental health.
And it's not just about research and policy. There are also those grassroots organizations like Heroic Hearts
Right?
that are working directly with veterans to provide support, education, and access to psychedelic therapies.
And speaking of veterans, the article really highlights the power of their personal stories. These accounts, they paint such a vivid picture of the transformative potential of these therapies.
Yeah, like we talked about before.
Yeah.
Tom Satterley
The Delta Force veteran?
shared how psychedelics helped him break through pain that no other method could touch.
Yeah.
And then there's Steve Kiefer,
Right.
who found that shift from constant battles to peace and fulfillment.
Their stories and the stories of so many other veterans.
And really emphasize the urgency of this issue.
They do.
We're losing way too many veterans to suicide. And traditional therapies just haven't been enough.
Yeah.
We need to explore every avenue
Every avenue.
for providing them with the support they need.
It's a call to action,
It is.
not just for researchers and policymakers, but for all of us.
You educate ourselves.
To educate ourselves
Advocate for change.
and advocate for change. And what really stands out to me is that these veterans, they aren't just passively receiving treatment.
Right.
They're becoming active participants
Yeah.
in their own recovery.
They're reclaiming their narratives.
They are reclaiming their narratives and defining their own path to healing.
That sense of agency can be so empowering,
It is.
especially for those who have experienced trauma and loss of control.
Yeah.
Psychedelic therapy, when done responsibly,
Yeah.
can really help people reclaim that sense of self
It's about moving beyond the limitations of those traditional models
and embracing new possibilities.
and embracing those new possibilities for healing and growth. It feels like we're on a whole new frontier
It really does.
in mental health care, and it's exciting to see how it unfolds.
And the veteran community is right at the forefront of this movement.
We are
They're not just benefiting from these therapies, they're paving the way
for a new paradigm.
for a whole new paradigm of mental health care.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground.
We have
We talked about the importance of safe practices,
setting
setting the potential benefits,
and risks.
and risks the challenges of accessibility of work of MAPS, the VA Heroic Hearts, and we've heard those powerful voices of veterans who have found healing and transformation.
There's a lot to take in,
It is a lot.
but it's a conversation that needs to be had.
We have to have this conversation.
We're talking about the lives of veterans who served our country,
Right.
and we owe it to them
We do?
to explore every option to give them the best possible care.
Absolutely. And it's not just about veterans.
Right.
This conversation has implications for everyone.
For mental health care as a whole.
For mental health care as a whole.
Yeah, we're learning so much about the potential of these therapies to address so many conditions.
And that knowledge has the power to change lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it feels like we're really at a turning point.
Yeah.
You know, moving away from all that stigma and fear that has surrounded psychedelics for so long.
For sure.
And it's just exciting to see how this new understanding is really opening up those possibilities.
Yeah.
Not just for, treating those mental health conditions, but for personal growth
Right.
and transformation.
It reminds us that the human mind is so resilient
It is.
and capable of healing.
Yeah.
And that sometimes we need to look beyond those conventional paths to unlock that.
We do. And speaking of unconventional paths, we did mention a couple of resources during this deep dive that might be helpful for folks who want to learn more. There's Heroic Hearts Project, which is doing such incredible work supporting veterans. And then there's the Veterans Guide to Psychedelics, which seems like a really great place to start.
It's a great resource.
Yeah, for anyone who is curious about this topic. And of course, we'll include links to both of those in the show notes.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think it's important to emphasize that, knowledge is power,
it is.
especially with something as complex as psychedelic therapy.
Yeah.
The more we understand about these therapies, the better equipped we are to make those informed decisions about our health and well-being.
It's about taking ownership of your healing journey, and finding those resources and that support system that really works for you. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with this sense of, hope and possibility, but also the sense of responsibility. We've seen just how powerful psychedelic therapy can be for veterans.
Yeah.
But we've also talked about, how important responsible use is, continued research,
Right.
increased accessibility.
It's an ongoing conversation.
It is.
This field is still evolving. There's
Yeah.
so much more to learn and explore.
There is.
But it's clear that these therapies hold so much promise for healing
They do.
and transformation, not just for veterans, but for everyone.
So as we leave this conversation, here's a final thought-provoking question for you to consider. What do you think are the most important factors to consider when exploring alternative therapies, especially for something as complex and personal as trauma? It's a question that deserves careful thought, as we continue to navigate this